Peace talks between Russia and Ukraine may be on the cards after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and his key European allies met U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House yesterday. At the meeting, Trump said America will help guarantee Ukraine's security in any deal to end the war with Russia. For more on the outcomes of that meeting, we're now joined by our U.S. correspondent, Simon Marks. Good afternoon. Simon, beyond, though, the promise of a still-to-be-facilitated meeting between Presidents Zelenskyy and Putin, what can be said to have been the outcomes or gains from yesterday's meeting?
Well, I think you couched that exactly correctly there, Vuyo, in your introduction, because while I'm sure many of our viewers will have seen headlines proclaiming that there's going to be a one-on-one meeting between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelenskyy, which is indeed what President Trump suggested on his social media feed last night after that day-long summit at the White House came to an end, in fact, there is no evidence that that meeting is going to take place. The Kremlin poured cold water on the idea immediately and said simply that the American leader and the Russian president, in a phone call yesterday, and President Trump interrupted his discussion with the Europeans to go and place that call to Vladimir Putin, that the Kremlin leader simply agreed that lower-level peace talks between Ukraine and Russia will be beefed up. Now, those lower-level talks have been sputtering along. Sometimes they come back to life, other times they collapse for many months. And so this notion of a Putin-Zelenskyy meeting is definitely at this stage completely overblown. I mean, I suppose the other deliverable that came out of the summit yesterday is that Volodymyr Zelenskyy went into the Oval Office for the first time since February of this year, back in the White House compound after having been thrown out of it by Donald Trump back in February. And the meeting was not combative. The meeting was civil. They appeared to get along. And if European leaders had trekked here trying to offer protection to Volodymyr Zelenskyy and to make sure that there wasn't a repeat of February's drubbing at the hands of Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, well, that clearly succeeded. But I think many of their other aims and ambitions did not. And indeed, within the last, couple of hours here, President Trump has given an interview to his favorite breakfast television program, Fox and Friends, on the Fox News channel, and has made it clear that he has no plans at all to commit US forces on the ground in Ukraine to enforce any kind of security guarantees. So those European leaders who left last night thinking that they had some understanding of what the US president was going to bring to the table, I think will be somewhat confused by the interview that he's given to Fox here this morning.
Well, there may not have been the blow-up we saw when Presidents Zelenskyy and Trump met in February. But what did Zelenskyy's presence in that meeting actually achieve? Did it take things forward in any meaningful way?
Well, there's no question that it puts the trajectory of their own personal relationship, Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Donald Trump, in a better place than it has been. However, we're now less than 24 hours since that meeting took place, and Donald Trump, in his interview with Fox this morning, has again falsely maintained that Ukraine started the war. He has embraced Vladimir Putin's argument that since Russia has now made such significant military advances in eastern Ukraine, Donald Trump certainly sounded like a man who thinks it's perfectly reasonable to expect the Ukrainian leader to give up the whole of the Donbass region in the east. That is something that Zelenskyy insisted yesterday, and his European allies backed him. He's absolutely not willing to do because it would put Russian forces on the other side of Ukraine's current defensive lines. There was also evidently absolutely no progress made on Zelensky's insistence that there has to be a ceasefire in place before meaningful peace negotiations can begin. And the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, really challenged Donald Trump on camera over that. Before the cameras were kicked out of the East Room, the German Chancellor essentially said to President Trump, "You're wrong if you think we can do this without a ceasefire before there can be another meeting, especially one between Putin and Zelensky, or a trilateral, Putin, Zelensky and Trump." Friedrich Merz said there has to be a ceasefire, and Donald Trump just dismissed that viewpoint out of hand. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, also had a pretty tense conversation on camera with Donald Trump, arguing that any three-way meeting needed to be a four-way meeting and that Europe needed to be given a seat at the table in discussions with Putin and Zelensky. No indication that President Trump is willing to embrace that. Indeed, on Fox News this morning, he accused European leaders yesterday of playing cute during their meeting with him at the White House.
It's a tricky one, Simon, because when President Trump spoke, he said they had had a lot of good discussions, a lot of good talks. But when one reporter asked President Zelensky what the deal, whether in fact they were able to make a deal, he said everything, but nothing came out of it. In other words, he couldn't say what it was exactly that he was able to take with or achieve, even though they had had this supposedly good conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think when he talked about everything, he was responding to a question about what kind of assistance he needed from the United States as part of security guarantees. And he was saying that what he wanted from the United States was assistance beefing up Ukraine's armed forces, providing intelligence information to Ukraine's armed forces, equipment, of course. There was a lot of talk yesterday about Ukraine's ongoing desire to get American Patriot missile batteries to defend its territory against Russian attack. And he also talked about the need for this to take place for many years going forward. And Donald Trump clearly was not in the mood for that sort of a detailed conversation, although there are reports that Volodymyr Zelenskyy indicated that Ukraine might be willing to sign a contract with American armaments manufacturers to spend billions and billions of dollars in the years ahead beefing up the Ukrainian armed forces. And Donald Trump's ears clearly pricked up at one point during the conversation when the Ukrainian leader was paying tribute to the quality of American weaponry. So there may be a business component to all of this. But I mean, the overriding feeling when they left last night was expressed by the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who said that the meeting had exceeded expectations, which, if you think about it, is quite a clever construction to offer, given that the expectations just 10 or 11 hours earlier at the start of the day for the meeting couldn't really have been any lower. So the idea that it exceeded expectations, may refer to the fact that Volodymyr Zelenskyy didn't find himself on the receiving end of another drubbing from President Trump. But this clearly was not a meeting that led, especially from what we're hearing today from President Trump in that Fox interview, to any decisive breakthroughs or succeeded in pulling him away from Vladimir Putin's orbit and thinking.
Of course, he did, Mr. Trump, that is, say that he will give them good protection and good security. Just to end it where you started, Simon, the lower level talks that the Russians insist on, is there any record of progress or of moving the needle that those level talks have ever achieved in the past?
Well, very incremental process, Vuyo, about the key issue that's going to be on the table in any Ukraine peace negotiation, and that, of course, is the carve-up of territory. No dramatic progress on that. But where they have succeeded in the past is in engineering prisoner swaps between Russia and Ukraine. And both President Trump and President Zelenskyy indicated yesterday that there could be another prisoner swap in the offing, as many as 1,000 prisoners on both sides being returned to their homeland. Now, we don't know how quickly that might take place. It would clearly require more negotiations between the Russians and the Ukrainians, and maybe that's where any next round of lower-level negotiations begin. Donald Trump made it clear today in that interview, again on Fox, he is really impatient for progress. He said that one European leader, whom he didn't identify, had said yesterday, you know, we should all meet again, face-to-face in a month, in order to advance this process. And Trump said, a month? We can't wait a month. There'll be another 45,000 dead in the battle zone if we wait a month. So he's definitely lit a fire under this process. Now we have to see the extent to which the Russians particularly, and the Ukrainian side, are willing to engage in meaningful negotiations at that lower level.
Simon Marks, that's why we're going to leave it for now. Thank you very much for your time. Our U.S. correspondent, Simon Marks, giving us an update on what has been happening since that meeting yesterday between the leaders of the European Union, the President of the United States of America, and, of course, the President of the Ukraine.